It's yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, I'm glad to be back at Kamailio World, right? All right, Kamailio World 25. Let's go. So, I'm going to walk you through a couple of things that I experienced around MCP, right? So everybody's, and I'll explain what that is, but basically conversational AI chatbots is the thing. People want to use them for all types of things, and I'll explain this in a little bit. I'm going to first give you a little bit of introduction of myself. I've been doing VoIP for about 16 years. A little fun fact about me is that during that time, I worked for a number of like Silicon Valley companies. I worked for Netscape. I worked for Sun Microsystems, Oracle. So I have a salesy background, which helps me a lot. So I did a lot of, I was a sales engineer for many, many years. And also the fun fact is that how I learned about Kamailio was from Fred, by the way. I used to own a restaurant in Detroit, and I had a meetup on Asterix, and of course Fred shows up at that time. He was like, "Hey man, you should learn Kamailio." I'm like, what? How do you say that again? Kamailio. So it's been a long time, and I appreciate Fred for turning me on to this. So I run a company called dOpenSource, and we do open source support around VoIP products. And then we started doing this project called DSIP Router it's been about 7 years now. Maybe even more. Maybe, I don't know. I lost track. And the whole reason how DSIP Router came about was because we kept building the same exact things over and over again. So I decided to package it up. As you all know, when you first start off with Kamailio, it's a little bit of a learning curve, right? So what we do is we package it up so that it makes it real easy for people, right? So it comes with Kamailio, obviously, RTP engine, a GUI, some bash scripts to do the install. And it's a really cool project that we've been working on for many, many years. I'm going to use DSIP Router a little bit to show you some of the things that we're doing, but this all can be applicable just to pure Kamailio. Real quickly, as Daniel just mentioned, I had to give a quick shout out to my colleague Tyler Moore. He did contribute this P-timer module, which just gives you more precision timing for being able to kick off certain jobs and things of that nature. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that he did some good work there. Super proud of him for taking the time and initiative to do that. All right, so problem space. So we were in a meeting with a customer, and they were like, "Hey," and I always know things are going to go left when they say this. They were like, your UI for DSIP Router is cute." And I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking that they're going to say like, it's missing this, missing that. We want you to add these additional things because people tend to do that. They want us to add a lot of things to DSIP Router. And we're always like, no, it's supposed to be simple for people to use. And if you want something more complicated, you should be hiring somebody to build some type of custom Kamailio configuration for you. But the conversation went left, and he was like, I just don't even want your GUI. I want to be able to interface with it with ChatGPT in particular. And I was like, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that before. And we had at the time had built a little MCP server for DSIP Router, but I wasn't thinking anybody was really interested in it. I just didn't think of it. But it really turned out to be, in talking to this customer, is that they just don't want their engineers having to learn another tool. They don't want them to have to learn the GUI, because they have 10 other tools to learn and understand and update, right? So anyway, so their expectation was that they didn't want to have to, from a management standpoint, have to wait for the support engineer to, I guess, also on top of the operational aspects of their engineers learning the tool, they don't want to have to wait for their engineer to actually grab the logs, look at Homer, all the things you do, right, in order to figure out and give a report to management on what's going on. So they wanted to be able to have more of a self-serve model, where they can be able to access the switches. Now, mind you, the engineers for this company are in the room with us. So they're like, in their head, I can see it in their face, they're like, absolutely not. They do not want these people to have any type of access to be able to do this, and for a number of reasons, right? Because if people have this access, they're going to start asking all kind of questions, right? Especially if they can just get access to these systems. But anyway, they decided that they wanted to move forward with this. So we started kind of like thinking through how we wanted to do this. And it became a situation where we already had this MCP server we had already built. So I was like, hey, why don't we like use this thing? And they agreed. And so we kind of installed it, got it going, got it pointing to DSIP router, which then obviously routes to Kamailio. And it was okay. I mean, I think it worked okay, but it wasn't the best. And I'll come back to that in a second. So I've been talking about MCP for a minute, and I just want to kind of give you some background on what MCP is. It's a specification that was created by Anthropic. And really, if you look at it, it's just a standard way of providing integration to these LLMs, right? So a very standard, very simple protocol. Some people say it's the USB of integrations for LLMs, right? So, and also other thing is that they were tied to ChatGPT because they had just bought their company, all the engineers' subscriptions. But what really was stuck with them was that they didn't want to necessarily be tied to just ChatGPT. MCP is one of these specifications that can be applied to any of these conversational tools, right? So if you look at like kind of the main components of MCP, it's really just three main things. It's really like tools, right? So you kind of hear that a lot of times, like what's this tools? But it's really kind of the hands of your LLM, right? So giving it some ability to do some actions, execute actions on your behalf. Then you have resources, right? So kind of to be able to grab information from systems and present that to folks. And then you kind of have prompts that kind of defines workflows. Like you can give it an action or give it a task to go do something, and it will it's kind of like the playbooks if you're looking at Ansible or procedures in order to do things. So if you look at how does MCP kind of work, this very simple diagram here kind of lays it out for you. So when you first like configure the MCP server into ChatGPT, for example, it does discovery to figure out what tools it has access to. And what that does, there's metadata that goes along with that. So when you start asking it questions, it basically gives it context clues on what it should be doing or what it has access to do. And then if you look at the process, once it actually knows what tools that are available, it'll actually register the tools inside of the LLM itself, right? So in this case, ChatGPT. And then it'll take a user request, whatever you wanted to do from in a natural language perspective, like list me all of the endpoint groups that's available, or list me all the providers or carriers, and then it'll take that natural language prompt and then try and figure out what tool to use based on the actual registration of the tools, and then it'll go execute that tool. And then it'll retrieve the data, and it'll process. The LLM will then process the result. So really simple workflow and how MCP works. That's why I think a lot of people have been adopting it. So before I I guess I can talk about that really quickly, and then I'm just going to demo it really quickly. So the V1 version of the architecture that we did for them is kind of like what I said. It was just kind of like a skunk project that we created for just having a basic MCP server for DSIP router. And we initially, it worked okay, but we weren't expecting like 50 people to use it. So, and there's problems, and I'll talk through some of that in a second. But let me just kind of like go over to it really quickly. So this is, I don't know how many of you have like looked inside ChatGPT and actually saw how you can register MCP servers. But I'm in developer mode. There's a little option you can set, and you can define applications. Like in this case, decent router is defined as the application. This is the URL to the MCP server. You can specify if you want authentication on or not. Don't yell at me. Trust me. In our customer situation, they have authentication turned on. Okay, I know all you smart people in the room are thinking like, why is that? But once you register it, it pulls the actions. Basically, these are all the function calls or API calls that it can do. So some of these are tools, some of these are resources, but it pulls all in. This is the discovery part that I talked about. All right. So anyway, so we're going to just. I can ask it some simple questions. Find me a list of, I don't know, let's say endpoint groups. So, and then I can ask it, I can actually tell it to do something. Create a new endpoint group. So in Decent Router, we have a concept of like, as you know, Kamailio doesn't have any direction per se by default. You have to kind of define direction. So for us, Decent Router is a very opinionated approach. So we have endpoint groups that typically are like the user agents, and then you have carrier groups, which is where it's really like the providers, carriers that you're sending traffic to. So if I want to create a new endpoint group, the good thing here is that since I gave it in the definition of the MCP what things are required, it's going to come back and say, hey, I can't create an endpoint group without this information. So I can give it, I can just give it Cam Telco is the name, and then the IP address is 192. No, I'm just making stuff up. I don't know. And it should go off and create it. I just lost my mic. But all right, cool. So it'll go off and create that endpoint group. And now if I say, you know, I'm lazy, I don't feel like typing again, I'm just going to say, provide me a list of the endpoint groups. And then it'll come back with the endpoint groups. Now, if you notice here, it takes a minute or two. It doesn't take a minute. It takes a couple seconds for it to execute the tool, right? Now, a couple of mistakes that we did here. And let me do this. Let's see. Let's see. Show me the CDRs for. I think I have something in Mack Telco. I think. The telecom. Great. So I don't know where I have CDRs at, but believe me, I have CDRs. And so when I had CDRs, I think I had list of endpoint groups. I had some CDRs in here. I'll go look at them in a minute. But when we did this, we didn't expect people to actually go off and say, hey, give me all of the CDRs for yesterday and compare it to the CDRs of today. So you're talking about like millions of calls, right? So inside of these LOMs, there's a concept of a context window, which some people have alluded to in the last couple of days, right? So if I go back here and I talk through this a little bit, you kind of can get where I'm going, but context windows really matter. And I really didn't understand, I'm not gonna lie to you, I really didn't understand the value and how context windows really work. So, you know, different LLMs have different context windows that it supports. So for example, I think ChatGPT, it all depends also on the subscription that you actually have with ChatGPT. So if you have a certain subscription, you get a certain amount of of context window. And just for those who don't know what context window kind of means, is just it means is the amount of data that the LLM can actually process at any point in time. So if you're going to get 1 million records, CDR records, and then you're trying to go get another 1 million CDR records and bring them into the context, it's not going to be pretty. And so that's what happened almost immediately. So what happens is that, and by the way, the context windows, this give you just a scope. I don't think I said the number. Like ChatGPT, I think on the low plan you get 100K, and then on the bigger plans, I think you get 300K, right? So that's not a lot when you start talking about a bunch of CDRs, or just in general a bunch of different data. If it's like in our case at the final version that we created from it actually goes to Homer as well and grabs data. So it's not a lot. So we had to figure out how to architect this properly. But bottom line is that we had some problems. And so we had to kind of figure out how to solve these problems, because another issue we had was we didn't understand the type of prompts that people would be asking. Because they can ask anything, right? Because every person has had their own ChatGPT account in this company. So without understanding what the questions could be, we couldn't optimize for it. And so that caused problems, because the way we were architected initially is kind of like this. We just had one little server here handling this request, and the server wasn't even sized properly either, right? If you're gonna do this from a enterprise level, you need to properly size the server, or at least have it in a clustered configuration, have it running on Kubernetes, something that can auto scale or something, or give more resources. The other thing that I didn't plan for, I must say, this was something I was like, what did I get myself into? Is that if it runs out of memory, it just doesn't respond. So if you've ever played with ChatGPT, it starts giving you wrong answers, or because it forgot what you asked, or there's just situations where it just will stop responding. And so we had to come up with another approach. And so the approach really comes down to, and I kind of went through all these lessons here, is that we had to come up with a more robust architecture, obviously. But here goes the other thing that happened. So this happened, we started building this in about November timeframe of last year. If you remember what happened in around December, January time, there was this thing came out called OpenClaw. And it was all this buzz around OpenClaw. And then I wasn't a Claude code person. Like, that wasn't my thing. I just used ChatGPT. If I needed it to write me something, it will go and do it. I'm sorry, this keeps bouncing and it's bothering me. I'm gonna it's driving me nuts. Okay. By the way, I'll just go aside. So we use agents for everything. So speaking of OpenClaw, I swear I'm going to get back on track here in a second. But like in our support channels, we have we have Clawbot that sits there. So whenever we have tickets that comes into our queue, that bot actually has access to our ticket system. We use OS Ticket. So it actually looks up the ticket and compares it to other tickets, and then gives us an output of what could potentially be the issue. So this has optimized us tremendously. We have a little small 10-person team, so having that to do this has been astronomical. So I highly recommend that you get an agent to do it. Okay, anyway, so when this came out, I stopped and was like, yo, we should potentially use skills, because everybody was talking about, building skill files, the MD files that actually lays out what the thing can do and have it. So we were like, maybe we should drop this MCP thing and go do skills. And we realized that skills really are just for defining certain workflows And it still needs tools, which is what MCP provides, in order to do it, in order to do things effectively. And we needed we just liked the approach of having a standard specification that we could easily move. Now, people will argue that you can feed this skill MD file and it will figure out how to create the proper tools to do it. But I think we wanted something more deterministic. We already have the LLMs being non-deterministic. We couldn't have the tooling that we use to be that way as well. So we needed something clear. So we decided to stick with MCP, and I think it was the right move. So all right, so moving to the V2 design goals here. We wanted to decouple the MCP infrastructure from the control plane. So when I say control plane, we there was an API, so with DSIP, everything comes together, right? So we had the MCP server kind of sticking on there, right? So you can't necessarily scale this appropriately, and there's all kind of other bad architectural things that and sins that we did with that. So we wanted to decouple it. We wanted to be able to scale independently from Kamailio. And by the way, they moved from DSIP because based on what they wanted to do to a pure Kamailio configuration. So that also was going on in the background. And then we added some caching layers to this as well. Now, caching, as we all know, can be good or bad, right? I mean, people sometimes, they want real-time data, they want the most up-to-date data, but there's a trade-off between having, up-to-date data, it's not like it's like days old, but just having up-to-date data versus it crashing and having slow and poor performance. Because we all remember the reason why they want to do this is that they like the ability to ask the questions, and it gives it information back in a fast, quick manner. And then we wanted to also reduce the context window pressure that we were having. And then add some observability and logging, such as we weren't logging the prompts that people were sending to us. So we weren't able to figure out why things weren't working in the initial release. Things would just fail, and they'll try and send us their prompt, and we'll try and go reverse engineer what potentially went wrong, but it just became a problem. So we went to this architecture here, where we have a cluster of MCP servers, so it runs on Kubernetes. We have a caching component, and then anything that's not in cache, we'll go ahead and hit the operational APIs that we have. That's the control plane. And then the control plane will talk to the boxes in purple. Kamailio, Grafana, the CDR, DB, talk to Homer if it needs to as well to grab certain data. So this is just a normal, it's not like it's rocket science, but for us, this was a new pattern for us. So we had to figure out how the best architect is to really be able to solve the problem and meet the requirement. If you, I think I just got a couple more slides here, and then I'm off here on stage, is that if you, and I think I already went through this already, the feedback loop is what I'll cover really quick. So remember I talked about we had these prompts coming in, but we weren't really able to get better or understand it. So in the V2 architecture, now we have a feedback loop. So we actually are grabbing the prompts that are being sent to us for whatever request, and then originally we weren't using AI to really get better. We were just sending it to a human to look at these, but now we've started incorporating this into an AI model so that we can more effectively figure out the best way and how to optimize this to answer whatever the question they have, and to also detect patterns in people asking different questions. We just don't want people all of a sudden coming to us and say, hey, I tried to use this thing and it wouldn't work. We kind of want to be able to proactively get better. Really at the big picture of this is really people really want conversational workflows. They want to talk to these systems in natural language. People don't want to wait for an engineer to get back to them. So we're just trying to not get rid of or replace SIP engineers at all. because that'll be like replacing my job too. So we just really want to augment it, allow the business to get the information they need in a fast fashion. So call to action. So you can leverage our example repo is here. I know it's in small print. I probably should have had a cute QR code. You can build your own. So honestly, the way we built our first decent router MCP server, I said, hey, ChatGPT, build me an MCP server based on this Postman collection I have. And then it was like, and it created it, and then that's what we used originally. So you can do the same, obviously. And then follow me at Machine Maker. And that's it. Any questions that you have? I'm perfectly clear.
Okay.
I know.
Thank you.
No problem.
Let me, no.
I
I need the microphone
okay.
for giving to the close to. Okay, so any questions about the AI and the integration with what I have as always this models and how long you spend to really find the good ones and the balance between local ones and using those on the cloud with money. Where you?
Well, in this case, the constraint is that they wanted to use ChatGPT. So it wasn't like we had to go, like they had the option to pick one. Originally, we tried to sell them on the fact that why don't we build your own chat client, right? But they were like, no, we don't want to do that because all of our engineers have ChatGPT. We just want to use the subscription we have. And I think what you're going to find is that people are going to pick their camp. They're either going to be in the Anthropic Claude camp or they're going to be in the ChatGPT camp. And they're going to be have a high affinity to one or the other. So we didn't even have the option.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not easy choice. I thought I get an answer because sometimes with one of the providers you hear complaints like the credit tokens, or how they call it, run out very quickly sometimes. Then maybe others are not really integrated as good as in a developer environment as the others. So, okay.
Yeah.
We still wait to get a definitive answer.
Nope.
Okay. Then, thank you, Mack.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right.